twice. The range is 100. So I have to give credit to OWI. In the process of recording and editing this video, a new update came out for the Infantry Overhaul playtest branch. And I've been in that today, and I think that they have addressed a lot of the concerns that I've had. My biggest concern in the Infantry Overhaul that I saw was the challenge of sight alignment, and that sight just kind of floating around and the stock not staying firmly in the shooter's shoulder and creating a parallax effect that it was very difficult to cope with. This was even more exaggerated under fire or whenever your stamina is low, and it creates a very punishing type of sway that is difficult to cope with, and not just difficult to cope with, but not real. It's not something that happens whenever you're actually shooting firearms, because you've got a good cheek to stock weld and you've got a good, stock placement in your shoulder pocket, and it is trapped. So while sway certainly happens, that sight misalignment, to the extent that it's illustrated in squad, even in the latest build, does not happen. But the play experience was significantly improved, in my opinion. The gunplay feels a lot better in this latest build. They've dialed down that misalignment quite a bit, though it still happens a little bit. There's still some Gaussian blur effect whenever you aim down sights in a picture-in-picture optic, and I think that needs to be tuned a little bit as well. And overall, I think they're on the right track. They are iterating rapidly. They are trying to nail this thing down. I think they're going to pull it off, folks. And yeah, so forgive that some of this information is out of date by the time you see it. I chose to publish this video anyway because I think the information is still valuable. This discussion is still important, and I want the developers to hear my take on what they're working on, not because my opinion is any more valuable than anyone else's, but because I have one and I have the ability to share it, and this is something that I'm passionate about. I wish OWI the best of luck in their implementation of the Infantry Overhaul, and I look forward to seeing what they come up with. I'm bleeding and I don't have any bandages. Shoot at first. Squad is and has been one of the most popular tactical shooters on the market for some time. It is certainly among the most ubiquitous platoon-wide player versus player driven tactical shooters on the market, and they recently announced that they are making an enormous change to the way that their game is played and experienced. And I love what they're going for, but I have some deep concerns about how they're going about it. In this video, we'll compare the impossible challenge tactical first-person shooter developers face in balancing a fun experience with realism and player experience by comparing what Squad has announced in their Infantry Overhaul with some of my real-world experiences and my other experiences as a gamer nerd. Last week, a couple of buddies and I spent about 3 hours playing a couple of different levels in the Squad Infantry Overhaul playtest, and overall, I had a really good time. The infantry play was better than it has been in a long time, but I still have some concerns about the size of the maps, how heavily vehicles are integrated into the maps, the overall pacing of the way that the game is played, and certainly some of the decisions they've made within the Infantry Overhaul itself. Their Infantry Overhaul announcement is broken down into a couple of different sections, and we're going to explore each of them now. But let me start by saying I love Squad. I always have, and I want the absolute best for the game. And one of the highlights of my time as a YouTube content creator was when they featured a clip of mine in their version 1.0 announcement trailer. But before we go on, I have to remind you guys to go check out my buddies over at Neomag. Neomag has been a longtime sponsor of the channel. They've been an awesome partner to me, and they manufacture high quality, American-made, high-value goods that'll increase your capability and your capacity as you everyday carry to protect yourself, your friends, and your family. In this clip, you guys are taking a look at the alias system, which allows me to quickly attach my holster to my belt or move it from that location to a hard mount in my truck or in my house if I have it mounted in a wall. And you can also see the original Neomag clip, which allows you to carry an additional magazine in your pocket. If you're interested in Neomag, check out their website linked below, and also make sure you subscribe to their YouTube channel where you'll get more information on how to use their products. All right, here I'm reading from OWI's announcement of the Infantry Overhaul off of their website. This section is called Where We Are Coming From, and in it they allude to their roots as the evolution of Project Reality. They say, yet during Squad's development, we faced the inevitable temptation to stray from this original vision, influenced by prevailing shooter trends and the desire for broader appeal. We found ourselves at times prioritizing individual skill and instant gratification over the core principles that made Project Reality exceptional. The evolving gaming industry, with its emphasis on fast-paced action and solo play, gradually seeped into Squad's design choices, leading to mechanics and features that favored a more independent playstyle and somewhat diluted the importance of teamwork and coordination. I really like what they're saying here. They're essentially admitting that they've drifted quite a bit from what the core concept and the core vision of Squad originally was, and they've described that the infantry play specifically is moving away from the teamwork and tactical nature of Project Reality and towards a fast-paced twitch shooter with low recoil and rapid aiming and clicking heads kind of experience, and they're trying to fix it. But here's their challenge. They have a committed player base right now, and they're accustomed to the way that Squad plays, and any major change to the core experience, the infantry experience of Squad, is going to risk turning off or losing their devoted player base, and there's still no guarantee that these sweeping changes will recruit veteran players to return to the game or bring in new players altogether. So they're really walking a tightrope here. In the next section of the announcement, they say where we are going, and they're talking about the ultimate goal of this infantry overhaul. They say moving forward, our primary goal is to steer Squad's combat systems towards a greater emphasis on teamwork and cooperation. We have learned valuable lessons from our previous work and player feedback, which have highlighted the need to enhance the gameplay experience by fostering a stronger sense of camaraderie and strategic decision-making. One of the key changes we are implementing is to create longer firefights, provide more opportunities for tactical choices as a squad. By adjusting the pacing and dynamics of combat, we aim to extend the duration of engagements, allowing players to make informed decisions and employ various tactics to overcome the situation. I love what they're going for. I totally get it. They don't want firefights to end because there's one elite gamer on a side that's able to click all of the heads of the opposing team, regardless of range or weapon, rapidly, immediately ending the firefight and turning it into a skill-based twitch shooter. That is not the intent of the developers. It's never been the vision of Squad, and I appreciate that they're trying to remedy that by increasing the duration of firefights. The big challenge here is there's not a lot of elegant ways in video game design to increase the duration of firefights, particularly in a tactical shooter. The easy way of extending the duration of firefights in a casual shooter or an arcade shooter is by increasing the time to kill to force people to get more hits before the firefight ends and one player is eliminated. If you increase the time to kill in a tactical shooter, all you are doing is making it a casual shooter. Bullets are painful. They can kill you. They can kill you immediately. In a tactical shooter focused on realism needs to retain that core principle. So a low time to kill is a requirement, and that easy fix, that easy design decision cannot be pursued because it would go against the vision of Squad. So instead, here's how they are aiming to increase the duration of firefights. The first one, which I'm actually on board with and I'm generally okay with, is the suppression system. They are doing a complete rework of suppression VFX, and this is how they describe it. Suppression now blurs the distance but keeps the foreground navigable, so you can seek cover, return fire, or escape. By depriving the suppressed player of some of their perception, suppression becomes a meaningful debuff and instant retaliation is inhibited. Being suppressed will require you to behave as you might in real life, despite not being in real danger. The enemy will use it to cause trouble for you, but remember that you can do the same to them. I like the way that the suppression feels in the infantry overhaul so far. I think it likely needs to be tuned on a per weapon basis, which is something that they are continuing to work with, and they've already announced that there is a per weapon suppression power. Your M4 is not going to suppress as effectively as a 240 Bravo, for example, and they're also doing some tweaks to the way that suppression inhibits your aim. So it increases your sway, it increases some of the twitching as you react to suppression. I have some issues with that because it is a negative player experience when your reticle is jumping all over the place. But what I do like about the way that they've done the suppression is the VFX sound and look very good, and I'm okay with the blur. I am, because when you're suppressing Squad now, you can't observe at range a clean, clear, crisp image, which prevents you from then rapidly identifying and immediately eliminating the person who is firing at you. Instead, now what you have to do is suppress the general area of that enemy player and, engage known, likely, and suspected locations and attempt to gain fire superiority, which is how you react to contact in real life. It is, providing the distance, direction, and description of the enemy, moving to cover, and immediately engaging that target to attempt to gain fire superiority so you can fix him in place and then choose to either break contact, attack, or maneuver against him. So I love that. I love that idea. I'm okay with it. It feels punishing and scary to be suppressed in squad now. It makes it very, very cinematic, and I'm generally okay with it. But now we're going to start moving into the more contentious portion of this video, and that is the major changes that are coming to gunplay. What the developers say is that to facilitate longer shootouts, we need to reduce the odds of them ending in 1 or 2 shots. They've reworked traditional hipfire into point shooting, and by this they mean that now your weapon sways as you move around. When you move your head around in the game, or when you look around, the weapon's going to move in unpredictable ways to a certain extent, and most importantly, perhaps, when you pull the trigger, the bullet is going to come out of that rifle and travel directly along its intended trajectory. So no longer can you go from a sprint to then rapidly point shooting, where your gun just jumps back into the center of the screen and provides a nice, predictable cone of fire dead center. If your gun is off to the side and you are at a light jog and you pull the trigger, that round is going to go off to the side. I think that's fair. It's a weird adjustment in a first-person shooter, but I am generally okay with it. Now here's where I have some challenges and some issues. Recoil. Developers say that recoil has been modified and made more sophisticated. They go on to say that recoil has been tuned to make full auto more situational and to create realistic trade-offs when using different kinds of weapons. They've added recoil misalignment, and recoil now causes the weapon to rotate on more axes and can be thought of as an additional dimension of recoil. This misaligns the sights and creates a natural cone of fire shot pattern. Okay, so the fact that recoil has been tuned to make full auto more situational, that is acceptable. Firing a weapon on full auto is difficult. However, I think squad is far too punishing in the way that it deals with fully automatic recoil. On screen right now, you see a clip of me dumping a 30-round magazine of 5.56 on full auto, and I'm able to hold the weapon steady, given that weapon has been modified to reduce recoil significantly, so that I'm able to control it. But 5.56 on full auto, even in a traditional M4, is controllable. It is not controllable beyond 50 meters, and at 50 meters, you're only going to score 10 to 20% hits if you are a well-trained shooter. It's punishing to replicate that in a video game. I think squad is handling it reasonably fairly, but they need to dial it down on fully automatic a bit. I would say also that most of us aren't running full auto on squad as it is, even in its current build, and that recoil has always been, fully automatic fire has always been situational. In real world, a carbine or a rifleman's rifle is typically not on full auto unless he is in a CQB environment where he believes that it is going to be an emergency situation, or he's doing something like clearing out a bunker, chasing a frag through a porthole, or putting a frag through the aperture of a bunker and then clearing out the back of it. But it is very situational. My big challenge with the way that recoil has been introduced into gunplay is this idea of recoil misalignment, where they say recoil now causes the weapon to rotate on more axes and can be thought of as an additional dimension of recoil. This is problematic for a couple of reasons. The first is because in real life, recoil does not occur in such a way as to dramatically change your stock to cheek weld and misalign your sights in a way that replicates what we would call parallax, where the point at which you are looking down, your optic shifts significantly enough that your point of aim through that optic is going to be bouncing all over the place and causing that strange axes of misalignment. That simply doesn't happen if you're a trained shooter using a carbine or a rifle or even a machine gun, particularly if it's mounted on a pintle or a bipod or a vehicle. It's just not real. And I've got a lot of clips that kind of were showing my recoil control, and I'm a good shooter. I'm not a great shooter, but I'm probably slightly above average, and I am not affected by recoil in a way that's being described in these developer notes. I would also say that squad has service members on their team. They have shooters on their team. They are not naive or agnostic to what it is like to operate a firearm. And here we see them experimenting and working some new ideas into a game design to try to come up with a solution. There has been a lot of backlash in the community to the way that recoil has been handled, and I suspect that it is going to be dialed down a lot, or we might see misalignment go away altogether. I would say that if you're static and you're firing either prone supported, prone unsupported, kneeling, sitting, standing, and you're not moving, misalignment does not occur. If you are firing on the move, misalignment does occur, although it is still to a lesser extent than what we're seeing in the squad update. And you are able to effectively maintain a cheek to stock weld, regardless of how quickly you fire, particularly on semi-automatic, still true of fully automatic, but to a lesser extent. The other issue with the way that this recoil misalignment is being illustrated in the animations in squad is that we're seeing the stock move around, and that doesn't happen. So this whole idea of recoil misalignment rests on this idea that your stock is not firmly fixed in your shoulder. And if you are a trained shooter and you are trapping the stock in your shoulder pocket and rolling your shoulder forward to capture it in that pocket and then pulling back on the rifle and pulling it into your shoulder as you fire, that stock does not move. And so the recoil misalignment in the animations that squad is showing is not possible. And I've seen some GIFs and some screenshots from buddies that have captured a stock that appears to be in the teeth or the mouth or the chin or the face of this shooter, and that simply does not occur. So I'm looking forward to future iterations of the Infantry Overhaul playtest to see how they handle that. Now here's the challenge. The reason they put this misalignment in the game is because it makes shooting harder. They want shooting to be more difficult because they want people to die slower. They want people to die slower so that firefights last longer. They want firefights to last longer because they want people to be able to get in position and win by maneuvering, not just clicking heads at pixels in close quarters or even at long range. So I understand the reason behind the decision, but it is just a really hard feature to integrate, and it is a very difficult problem to solve. They've tried to solve it by this recoil misalignment, and I don't think that that is the way to solve it. You could argue that maybe you just add more recoil, but then you run into this issue where your recoil is illustrated in the game in a way that is, you know, excessive or beyond what it would be in real life, and then you have people like me coming back and saying, hey, that's not realistic. So then we find ourselves back at square one, where it's easy to kill people, and they're trying to get away from that. So some other potential solutions that I could offer squad is to start simulating ballistic protection in the game. Allow plate carriers to catch rounds periodically, allow, you know, helmets to catch rounds periodically, rather than not simulating any ballistic protection, as is the case so far as I know right now. And then the other way to do it is just to test what it would be like without this recoil misalignment, but keeping your suppression effects as they are, because I think that suppression right now is very punishing. And my kind of suspicion is that if you leave suppression, as is demonstrated in the current Infantry Overhaul, you're going to get longer firefights, and you don't need to completely change the gunplay with the recoil misalignment specifically, as has been done so far. Okay, that's enough on recoil and recoil misalignment. The other thing they said here is that sway has been reworked from the ground up. I thought we were done with recoil misalignment, but I gotta say this about sway. When you're aiming down sights, recoil misalignment now happens when you're not shooting. So if you're just aiming down sights in general, you get sway that is occurring on all the same axes as does the recoil pattern. And so sway occurs without firing. And the idea that if I have a good shoulder pocket, a good cheek to stock weld, I'm pulling back into my weapon system, and I'm also not shooting, and I'm like standing static or kneeling static or prone supported, the idea that sway would cause recoil misalignment is just, it's not true. And if it does cause it at all, it would be so negligible as to not affect my ability to hit a man-sized target at 100 meters. It's just not real. So yeah, sway is okay. You know, you're going to have uncontrollable small movements in your muscles and your ability to hold a rifle steady, but it will not cause that translation along the same axes as does recoil. Okay, all right. Moving on. They've also increased initial target acquisition time. Again, I'm reading from the developer announcement here. They say particularly when running and gunning, and then it fades out quickly enough that you can still post up and make accurate long-range shots. I am good with that. They've also, you know, changed the speed at which you're able to get on target from different positions. So if you're prone, crouched, or standing, I'm okay with that. I haven't, you know, actually measured them, but I've got a drill on screen right now showing me engaging a target at about 50 meters. It's a 10-inch steel plate from prone and then sitting and then kneeling and then standing. I'm able to do it pretty quickly, and I would hope the game can replicate kind of that same general speed of a trained shooter doing that. And then the last thing I will hit with respect to the Infantry Overhaul is the reworked picture-in-picture scopes. Overall, I think picture-in-picture scopes look incredible. I did notice a performance hit when aiming down sights in picture-in-picture. I think that is just, you know, a new feature on a pretty demanding to run game that I was trying to run on high settings for the case of recording, now having to render two scenes. They're rendering a scene through the picture-in-picture optic, and they're also having to render the outside scene. And then the other thing I would say about the picture-in-picture scopes is that there are certain optics you fire with one eye, particularly your magnified optics at long range. If you're a precision shooter operating a bolt action or a gas operated precision system at range, you're probably closing an eye to do that. However, if you are shooting a low powered variable optic or even a fixed magnification optic like an ACOG or an RCO, you are firing that optic, or you are firing that weapon with both eyes open. And the reason I mention this is because with the picture-in-picture integration as of now, when you aim down sights, you get this Gaussian style blur outside of the rendered scene, and that I think is unrealistic, because typically if you're operating a fixed powered optic or a low power variable optic inside of, let's say, 8 times magnification, and you have both of your eyes open, you're able to accurately engage using your primary, your dominant eye looking down that sight while still scanning the peripheral environment with your other eye. And so I'd like to see that Gaussian blur go away. I think that's probably going to make it even more demanding to achieve a picture-in-picture render, and I get that. But right now, your magnified optics are damn near useless in close quarters, and your red dot sights and your reflex sights and your those CQB style sights are damn near useless at range. They have said that they're going for specific roles for each class, so I understand that. But in reality, if we're talking 300 meters and in, I'm able to hit a man-sized target with a reflex sight damn near just as effectively with an unmagnified optic like an EOTech or a Aimpoint T2 or you name it, your CCO or whatever. I am equally capable hitting a man-sized target with those optics as I am with a fixed magnification optic like a 4-power ACOG or a low-power variable optic that might get me out to a 6 or an 8 times zoom. The difference is going to be the speed at which I acquire that target, and certainly my ability to positively identify that target. So for those reasons, I think the picture-in-picture needs to at least a little bit of rework so that I can still see out of my peripheral vision whenever I aim down sights. And I think once that is complete, I will be satisfied with the way that picture-in-picture has been integrated in the Squad Infantry Overhaul. This has been 20 minutes of me rambling. All of it is my opinion. I empathize entirely with the developers taking on what is an extremely difficult task. Ultimately, they will not be able to please everyone, including myself. There will be naysayers and detractors on social media, and that is perfectly fine. I think that what the developers are going for is true to Squad's vision. I admire their courage in making such a massive change to their game at this stage in its life, and I look forward to their success because I know, or at least I hope and have confidence in their ability to find a reasonable medium somewhere in the middle of where they are right now and where they were in the past. And when that happens, I look forward to coming back to Squad and enjoying the new infantry gameplay. If you enjoyed this video, if you're looking for more Squad, if you're looking for more comparison between real world and video games and the way that we enjoy these two things, then I encourage you to subscribe to the channel. I am Controlled Pairs, and this has been Squad's Infantry Overhaul. I will see you in the next one.